The Riot MMO is probably the most anticipated and talked about MMO in history that so little is known about. I'm willing to say there has never been as many videos made about an MMO that we don't even know the name of as there has been for this MMO. And yes, I know I am partially to blame for that. I'm one of the countless MMO players that are desperate for a good, modern, appropriately monetized MMO. So it makes sense that people are already hyped for this project and other projects like Ashes of Creation. Despite not knowing the name of this project, the executive producer is at times extremely active on Twitter, as are others that are high up in the leadership of this MMO, such as Candace Thomas and Mark Yetter. So we have gotten some idea of where this project could be headed, as I have talked about in my previous videos and in my Everything Known document. And I'm left with one big question, the question that determines whether this MMO rises to the top of my personal most anticipated MMOs. That is, will this game closely follow the WoW formula, or will it blaze its own trail and innovate enough to make this game unique and not the same carbon copy WoW clone we have seen so many times? When asked specifically about how much this game will innovate, Greg said, "We definitely will innovate in a lot of hopefully exciting ways. What we don't want to do is make a super experimental game that shatters genres but appeals to only a handful of players." Another question in a similar vein led to this response. "Too soon to share, but as I have said before, we know players want different things in an MMO, and we won't be able to deliver on all of that. Some want almost all PvP, some want almost all PvE, some want nostalgia, some want something brand new. None of these desires are wrong." Both of these are very non-committal answers, as you would expect this early before any major news drops have hit for this MMO. Both of these answers do give me hope that innovation is a fairly high priority, but there is a greater force that makes me think this game is closer to a WoW clone than it is something different, and that is the history of Riot Games as a company. Riot Games is known for making games that are very similar to the previous games of a genre, but just making them extremely well made, polished, feature-rich, and in many cases more simplified in order to have mass appeal. Basically, they take something that has already worked and just make it better and easier to get into. League of Legends is a classic example. Dota was a very complex MOBA, and League stripped away a lot of the complexity and added a lot of polish. However, I am confident that approach would not work as well in the MMO genre. The MMO genre is much more established than the MOBA genre was when Riot took it over. There are a lot of MMO players that are burnt out from the same old formula that we have seen repeated over and over. The few MMOs that tried to do things differently were ruined by pay to win or a lack of funding, which led to very little polish. The other thing that gives me pause regarding Riot is the size of the company. Riot is massive now. They have 2,500 employees. Their parent company, Tencent, is the second largest gaming company in the world with $500 billion market cap. Why do I view this to be a potential problem? Because I view the smaller businesses of the world as the ones that are the biggest innovators typically. Now, to be fair, it is hard to quantify innovation, and a lot of the most innovative companies lists out there have huge companies at the top of these lists, but most of these lists are compiled using subjectivity, not objectivity. Also, the way these mega corporations innovate primarily is by buying out smaller companies that patent some new technology. They buy the innovators. Now, to be fair, large corporations can take a chance on innovating and be fine financially. Tencent has unlimited money, so they can certainly do that if they want. The problem is, when you start talking about publicly traded companies, they tend to not take any risks. They go the safe route very often in order to not scare shareholders with a failed product. And then you start to look at the structure of these companies and the extremely tall leadership structure of them. If someone down the chain has a really cool idea, they have to get it approved up the chain, and that can take a long time, and there is a strong chance someone who is disconnected from the project will view it as too big of a risk and shut the idea down. Whereas with smaller studios, the CEO of the company might be in an office right next to the game developers. They might interact with the CEO every day. Generation and propagation of ideas is so much quicker and easier in that environment. Now, I am not saying small studios can always afford to take chances either. In fact, they oftentimes, from a financial perspective, are given one shot to succeed. if their first game launch is a failure, that is the end of that studio in a lot of cases. But they also know that to compete, they have to do some things differently than the mega studios they might be competing with. They know they probably need to find a smaller niche of players to appeal to, or make a mass appeal game that is fundamentally different from the other mass appeal games in that genre. Another factor is the amount of leadership that has at one point been heavily involved with World of Warcraft. Greg Street and Candace Thomas both have a lot of Blizzard experience where they worked on World of Warcraft for many years, and there are many others working on this project that also have a ton of WoW dev experience. The good thing to offset this is Greg wants to specifically hire devs without MMO dev experience later on in the project. I actually think this is a great thing. But will it be enough to offset the large amount of World of Warcraft dev experience? So while Riot has been on a serious roll, mostly by making the same game as others but much better, I wonder if that will work for an MMO. The MMO genre has become extremely stagnant, and I'm not sure making something that very closely follows the WoW model will be wildly successful, no matter how much polish or accessibility it has. I think with this project they would do well to diverge a bit from the way they have made games in the past. Innovate to an extent, but really it is not necessarily just about innovation. I think it is more about diverging from the most popular model of the genre. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking in terms of innovation. I'm not sure the upper management wouldn't end up canceling the project if they did try to heavily innovate anyways, as we saw with Blizzard's Titan being canceled. It will be interesting to see how this unfolds. Part of the problem with why we see little innovation in the MMO space is that it takes a lot of money to make an MMO in the first place, so most AAA MMOs are made by large companies, and large companies are afraid to innovate for all the reasons I have outlined above. And that is my biggest concern for this project. I think it'll be a great game, very polished and highly accessible, as Riot always does. But will it be different enough? Will it be unique? It's way too early to know, but that is what I am watching. Later this year, we should get a much better idea of what this game really is, and it may sway my opinion and potentially even move this project up from my second most anticipated upcoming MMO, surpassing Ashes of Creation. But with the role Ashes has been on lately, I would say that is probably unlikely unless this game really nails their information reveal and addresses these concerns I have for it. And that is all I have for this one. If you like my style of looking at things in depth and really getting into the little details of things, consider subscribing. And with that, I will see you in the next video.